During the afternoon of March 18, 1925, a schoolteacher in DeSoto, Illinois, peered through her classroom window, noticing the sky morph into the color of dirty water. The clock had just struck 2. Dozens of children sat hunched over assignments. Outside, the atmosphere turned eerily motionless before a low rumble rolled in from the west, deep, relentless, resembling a freight locomotive that refused to stop. Decades later, a survivor recalled how the surroundings felt as though they sucked in a single, deep breath. Within 60 seconds, the brick schoolhouse disintegrated, burying a generation of local children. Not a single person inside that structure possessed any vocabulary for the meteorological beast bearing down upon them. Warnings never arrived. By the hour the sky finally cleared that evening, the identical monster that shattered their small settlement had sliced a deep trench across 3 states, leaving a scar that geographers still map today. To comprehend how a single afternoon claimed nearly 700 lives, one must first appreciate the absolute normalcy of that morning. March throughout southern Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana usually brought deep mud to rural roads and thick coal smoke hovering over mining settlements. Agriculturalists inspected their acreage. Merchants swept dirt from storefronts. Back in 1925, weather predictions relied on primitive telegraph networks, operating as little more than educated guesswork. Most of all, a strict bureaucratic directive forbade the use of the word tornado in federal forecasts, out of fear that the term would trigger mass panic. As a result, that morning's government bulletin predicted nothing more than rain and strong shifts of wind. Warning sirens did not exist. Radio broadcasts lay years in the future. Those going about their daily routines lacked any official terms to describe the peril advancing over the horizon, completely unaware that local barometers registered pressure drops never before documented. This plunging atmospheric pressure offered the earliest, most silent warning. Barometric weight represents the literal mass of the sky pressing down. When it drops precipitously, it signals that some colossal force is ripping the upper atmosphere apart. A handful of observers watched the mercury drop and stared in disbelief at their instruments. Warm, moisture-laden currents from the Gulf of Mexico surged northward, colliding with a wall of frigid Canadian weather over the Ozark Hills. This collision triggered a violent rotation along their thermal boundary. Usually, such dynamics yield a severe tempest. Instead, they birthed a huge, exceptionally powerful supercell tornado built for total destruction, touching down as families finished their midday meals. Around 1 o'clock that afternoon, near the hamlet of Ellington, Missouri, the condensing funnel touched the earth, claiming the life of a local farmer. This marked the opening tragedy. Accelerating rapidly, the vortex attained a forward velocity that climatologists still struggle to comprehend. While ordinary twisters lumber across the countryside at 20 or 30 miles per hour, offering residents a brief window to seek shelter, this system sprinted forward at nearly 60 miles per hour, outrunning the automobiles of the era. Rather than bouncing, skipping, or curving across counties, the funnel carved an unusually straight path toward the northeast, behaving like a guided missile that obstinately refused to break contact with the soil. What physical mechanisms allow a single supercell to grind against the earth for hours, traversing multiple states without losing momentum? By subscribing to this channel, you will discover how frequently history's most catastrophic events originated from hazards that authorities actively dismissed. The historical records yield explanations far more unsettling than any local folklore, detailing a tragedy that fundamentally forced meteorologists to discard their old paradigms. Slicing through rural Missouri first, the cyclone pulverized agricultural properties near Annapolis, stripping homesteads down to bare concrete footings. First responders encountered homes that had buckled or completely vanished, their framing and heavy roofs deposited miles away. Cattle were thrown over open pastures, timber barns dissolved into splinters. Because this portion of Missouri remained sparsely populated, the cyclone took relatively few lives here, but far greater devastation waited across the Mississippi River. Over in Illinois, the settlements grew much larger, characterized by dense rows of wooden frame houses and congested commercial districts where thousands of citizens went about their routines, completely oblivious to the engine of destruction rushing up from the southwest. Witnesses observed another terrifying anomaly that set this event apart from all others. It lacked any identifiable shape. Standard twisters exhibit a distinct, tapered condensation funnel, a dark rope dangling from the cloud base, which prompts immediate flight. This monster concealed its identity. Rather than producing a visible funnel, it presented as a roiling, boiling wall of black soot and topsoil over a mile wide, sweeping across the terrain like a low bank of smoke. Many individuals misidentified the approaching mass as a heavy rain shower, realizing the truth only when the debris field swallowed their properties. By the moment they recognized the hazard, escape had become impossible. Crossing the state boundary offered no salvation. Entering Illinois, the tempest flattened Gorham, establishing a template of total annihilation. Within seconds, nearly half of the population lay dead or severely injured. Houses flew off their foundations. From there, the wind advanced upon Murphysboro, a bustling center of 10,000 residents supported by coal mines and railroads. What occurred next stands as the deadliest single-community tornado strike in United States history, claiming 234 lives in Murphysboro alone. To make matters worse, fires erupted across the wreckage as ruptured gas mains ignited, pinning injured survivors beneath heavy debris as flames swept through the leveled blocks. Young children bore the heaviest burden of this catastrophe. At DeSoto, the public school took a direct blow, and 33 pupils perished when the brick structure folded inward. Surviving instructors recounted how they shielded students with their bodies as walls disintegrated overhead. In the aftermath, frantic parents scrambled over mounds of rubble, clawing at wooden beams and screaming names into the dust-choked silence. Some located their loved ones unharmed. Many pulled lifeless bodies from the debris. Across the broader path of destruction, over 2,000 children lost one or both parents, and multiple families ceased to exist in the span of a single minute. Slightly further east, in the mining community of West Frankfort, fate dealt a uniquely cruel hand. Hundreds of laborers worked deep underground in coal shafts when the vortex struck the surface. The instant power grid failure plunged these miners into absolute subterranean darkness. Navigating emergency egress shafts, they finally ascended to the surface, only to behold an environment that bore no resemblance to the neighborhoods they departed hours earlier. Many stepped into the daylight only to discover their residences reduced to matchsticks, with wives and children missing or dead. The bustling community they traversed during their morning commute had utterly vanished from the surface of the earth. If this historical account moves you, please support the channel by clicking the like button. This simple action assists the algorithm in delivering this narrative to larger audiences who remain unaware of how close countless families stood to complete annihilation on that dark afternoon. Refocusing on a single residential street brings the sheer magnitude of the catastrophe into sharp relief. One mother clutched her infant close, diving into a ditch just as her dwelling rose into the sky. Opening her eyes moments later, she discovered the structure had vanished, yet the infant in her arms survived unharmed. Others suffered far worse fates. Rescue parties discovered neighbors thrown hundreds of yards from their properties. Pieces of straw pierced solid planks like iron spikes. A catastrophic worst-case event unfolded across nearly 200 miles, outstripping any potential rescue response because the rotating monster traveled faster than any automobile, locomotive, or telephone line could transmit warnings to those ahead. An aerial view of the damage path reveals an even more chilling sight. For mile after mile, the earth appeared as though a colossal iron plow had ripped through the terrain. Where thriving hamlets once stood, there remained only bare concrete and railroad tracks twisted like wire. This atmospheric beast did not leave a simple scattering of localized damage. Instead, it left an extraordinary track of devastation spanning over 200 miles, slicing through farms and populated municipalities alike. First responders following the path traced the destruction as if traveling along a highway, leading them directly from one shattered settlement to the next, with virtually no untouched soil in between. Eventually, the cyclone crossed into its third state. Charging into Indiana during the late afternoon, the system slammed into the communities of Griffin and Princeton, leveling Griffin so thoroughly that virtually every single building disintegrated instantly. By this point, the monstrous vortex had ground against the earth for more than 3 full hours. A terrifying feat of longevity that shattered every established rule of meteorological science. The system had traversed rugged Missouri hills, crossed 2 major rivers, and plowed deep into the Indiana coalfields without ever lifting, maintaining its rapid, unwavering march toward the northeast. Analyzing the underlying science reveals the unique atmospheric engine that sustained this historic event. Meteorologists who later studied the data uncovered a rare alignment of dynamics. A deep, low-pressure center positioned itself perfectly over the Midwest, drawing an exceptionally strong, moisture-laden jet stream directly from the Gulf of Mexico. This stream of warm, unstable currents fueled an exceptionally strong warm front that remained stationary right along the track of the disaster. Because no dry, stabilizing drafts entered from the west to disrupt this cycle, the parent supercell remained locked in continuous thermodynamic balance. The collision of these atmospheric currents created extreme wind shear, rotating the updraft with tremendous energy while constantly feeding it fresh moisture. This continuous fuel supply allowed the vortex to maintain its structural integrity over hundreds of miles, operating as a self-sustaining heat engine that defied the normal life cycle of convective systems. Nearing the settlement of Petersburg, Indiana, around 4:30 that afternoon, the cyclonic engine finally exhausted its energy. The huge wall of spinning debris began to thin. The low-frequency rumble that had terrified 3 states gradually faded, and the vortex finally retracted into the overcast sky as rapidly as it had descended. Over a span of slightly more than 3.5 hours, The system had traveled approximately 219 miles, establishing the longest continuous ground path ever recorded on Earth. One moment, the vortex violently erased municipal boundaries. The next, a deep, eerie silence settled over the splintered remains, interrupted only by the crackle of localized fires and the desperate calls of survivors searching the rubble for signs of life. Once officials completed the grim task of casualty counting, the official records confirmed what survivors already understood intuitively. 695 individuals perished during those brief hours, solidifying the event as the most lethal single-vortex disaster in United States history. A tragic record that remains unsurpassed a century later. Over 2,000 citizens suffered injuries. Thousands of residences lay in ruins. Property losses, calculated in 1925 currency, exceeded $16 million, representing billions in modern purchasing power. The atmospheric monster achieved all this devastation in a single afternoon, leaving a track so extraordinarily elongated and linear that contemporary scientists initially rejected the hypothesis that a single localized weather system could have produced such continuous ruin. This initial scientific skepticism sparked decades of academic debate. For years, several researchers contended that the damage path must have resulted from a successive sequence of distinct twisters touching down in series, as early academics struggled to accept that a single vortex could maintain contact with the Earth across such a vast distance. Modern meteorological reanalysis has challenged the traditional view, suggesting the event may have been a sequence of separate tornadoes in rapid succession rather than a single continuous track. When experts retroactively evaluated the disaster using modern scales of intensity, they classified the event at the highest possible tier, denoting wind speeds capable of sweeping away well-constructed masonry. The deep human tragedy of that afternoon far exceeded what statistics can convey. This territory supported hard-working coal miners, railroad laborers, and small-scale farmers, communities already familiar with economic hardship, who suddenly lost not only their residences, but their entire municipalities, educational institutions, houses of worship, and the tight-knit social networks that defined their lives. Young children faced lives of sudden orphanhood. Several severely hit settlements vanished permanently from the map. Archival photographs from the ensuing weeks depict shell-shocked survivors standing amidst vast expanses of timber debris, staring blankly at the bare earth where their homes once stood, clutching whatever small, unbroken household keepsakes they rescued from the ruins. Out of this deep collective grief emerged a key shift that protected subsequent generations. The tragedy dramatically showed the grave risks of archaic forecasting rules and the total absence of early warning communication. In subsequent decades, technological developments and evolving public safety needs propelled the federal government to establish standardized weather alerts, organized civilian spotter networks, and emergency sirens. The populations of 1925 possessed no such safeguards. They received only a benign morning bulletin predicting rain, followed by an ominous stillness in the atmosphere, and finally a fast-moving wall of debris that offered zero chance of escape. Every emergency broadcast that sounds across a mobile device today traces its operational lineage directly back to the vanished municipalities of that fateful afternoon. A century later, the track of that historic vortex remains the defining benchmark against which all modern twisters are measured. The longest, the deadliest in U.S. history, and one of the most unusual meteorological phenomena ever recorded. It serves as a stark reminder that the most catastrophic hazards are frequently those that society has not yet named or understood, traveling faster than communication lines, concealed within weather patterns that appear perfectly ordinary until the trap snaps shut. If this historical account resonated with you, and if you wish to analyze the hidden physical forces that shape historic natural disasters, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Vast archives of historical records remain unexplored, filled with forgotten events waiting to be brought back into the light.